What's up, Zach here, and today I've got the all-new Mizuno Wave Enforce Court, and yes, it does look a lot like the Wave Enforce Tour, but let's see if it functions and feels anything like it. Let's get into it. And thanks to Mizuno for sending me a pair of these over to check out. However, as always, this video is not sponsored, and all opinions, good, bad, and different, are all my own. Now, starting off in the uppers, the first thing that I wanted to see when I got these out of the box was, does it have the double ankle collar? And no, unfortunately it does not. It is a very standard ankle collar. You do get a runner's knot, which does go pretty far proximal. However, I noticed if you don't use that runner's knot, the heel slippage is actually pretty severe. You can slip right out of the shoe. If you do use it, it's mild to moderate. So that is a huge difference from the Wave Enforce Tour. If you're looking for the crazy lockdown in this line of shoes, like I said, it is still the Wave Enforce Tour that is your best bet. As you go down the lace line, you'll see you actually have pretty chunky textile weaving going all the way down from kind of adjacent to the lace line, which is reinforced all the way down. That is nice, all the way into the midfoot, and then this has backing all the way around that weaving. Now, if you look at the tongue is actually pretty thick. It has 2 layers of padding on it. Then as you go into the forefoot, it also has 2 layers of padding on it. Now, the good news about all that padding is it's very padded, right? It feels pretty plush. The problem with that is you look at the breathability test, these things do heat up 132.1 degrees. That is quite a bit of heat trapping, and there's just, like I said, there's just a lot of places to trap heat. The interesting thing, though, is you look at the breathability mapping of these things, yeah, fog gets out of the sides of the tongue because there's no gusset in it, but fog is also getting out of the forefoot of the shoe after a little bit. It doesn't come out, it doesn't blow out of the shoe, but it does get out of there. So I would say these shoes do better with moisture retention, which is actually pretty surprising for me. But in terms of heat retention, like I said, there is just a lot of layers in this shoe to hold on to heat. However, like I said, the tongue isn't gusseted, so you are going to get some egress there. But once again, the bad part of that is you're not going to get, the really crazy lockdown of something like a gusseted tongue or like a double ankle collar. In the upper durability test, 10-second tire grit sandpaper, yeah, I mean, Burr does not make it anywhere near through the drag guard. That drag guard is actually pretty big and covers a pretty large surface area. You do get some exposed foam here, so that's gonna look a little bit weird, but it is actually a little bit of a tougher drag guard than it looks. It also does have a pretty stout heel counter in these, so even though there isn't a lot of foxing and reinforcement along the rest of the uppers, it's, like I said, it's more mesh, the heel counter does stay pretty darn strong. Getting into the midsole teardown, it is both more and less than meets the eye. On the Wave Enforce Tour, obviously, you remember that video, there is just so much going on in that midsole and so many well thought out components. And these ones, you basically just do get a dual density foam setup. It's that more dense energy foam in the heel, and it actually is kind of like an undulating foam insert there. I'll try to show it on the camera. It is kind of hard to see because both foams are black. There's no contrast in the colors of the foam. And then you get much less dense, more springy foam going into the forefoot. I will say the shoe does feel pretty light and swift on foot. There is no shank or any stabilizing elements on the lateral side. There's no containers, right? And there's no shank. So because the more dense foam is kind of limited to the heel, these are going to start to break down in the midsole, obviously, because there's really nothing containing the foam. Now, if you look at this thing, though, on the balance height test, actually pretty surprising. 36 centimeters in the rear foot, 34 in the forefoot. I would have thought that a little bit more, light elasticy foam, if that's a word, would do a little bit better, especially against the concrete. But no, the more dense energy foam in the rear foot actually, had a little bit of a better bounce. It also may have been both densities of foam bouncing with the ball bearing. And honestly, on court, kind of translates, like I said, does feel pretty light, breezy, airy, pretty easy to get back and forth on. It does not feel like there's a lot underneath of you giving you a push or assist or anything. There's really no launch assist on this, and it definitely doesn't feel like a springboard, but like I said, it does feel very light, and obviously with the weight of these shoes, they also just are pretty light. And so with the setup, there is kind of a give and take there. Getting into the outsole tread, this is pretty similar to what we've seen from Mizuno. You do get perpendicular herringbone. On the medial side, you do get a more horizontal herringbone, and on the lateral side, more linear herringbone, then a really long breathing channel underneath of that. And the rubber is gridded, right? It has a micro gridding on it too, which is nice too. Look at this thing on the grip test ramp, slips at 37 degrees, which it was kind of what I noticed on these. They were you know, they grab when you want them to. You know, they can slide if you want them to as well. They're light enough shoes as well. They're pretty unencumbering. Look at this thing on the outsole durability test though, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper. Basically all the burr does is clean off the gritting. Now, like I said, a lot of these shoes with this micro gritting on it, same with the Lacoste AGLT 23 Ultra, it's fantastic until it gets worn down, right? Now the durometer of these comes in at 17.5, so it's decently strong rubber, especially for a budget shoe. So I would say, yes, the durability is good for sliders. It's gonna be easier to slide once you get rid of that micro gritting, but the profile might change a little bit once you start wearing the tread down. I would expect, though, this tread to last just as long as the Wave Enforce Tour does, though. Now, if you look at this thing on the speed ratio, which I thought was really interesting, comes in at a 2.75 shank score of 0, because there is none, stays at a 2.75. I think while they're new, yeah, that's pretty much kind of how I found them. They were very quick shoes. I mean, very, very quick shoes. I honestly, though, think that's number one, the shape and form of this shoe, because it is such a nice flowing shoe, right? It's very easy to get from step to step, and because it's such a light shoe. They also are tremendously well-balanced shoes. Same with the Wave Enforce Tour. It's one of the reasons I like the Wave Enforce Tour so much, just because the shape of the shoe, the way it sits against the ground, full-length tread. I mean, it's just, you know, it's a very, very just well-balanced shoe on foot. That speed ratio is going to start to come down tremendously, though, once the shoe starts breaking in and breaking down, because, like I said, there's just not a lot of stabilizing elements on the shoe. So if you're a very lightweight player, or if you go through shoes pretty quickly, then they should do okay. If you're someone that wants to hold on to these, expect these to feel a little bit more dull as they get older. But getting into the fit of the Wave Enforce Court, this was really confusing. When I put them on, I thought these were really short shoes. Turns out they are not really. They do have a 12-degree inflare, which really is kind of middle of the road, not too bad. But then their length is 28.7. I mean, it's only just a hair short. It's really not that bad. But when you look at the width, that's kind of where it gets into why the shoe felt so short. The width at the metatarsals comes in at 9.7 centimeters, which is pretty forgiving. But the toe box width only comes in at 10.3 centimeters. And usually if it's not a whole centimeter bigger, that means that shoe is tapering pretty hard from the metatarsals to the toe box. And then the toe box taper comes in at 31 degrees, which isn't terrible, but it's not on the lighter end either of tapers. So really the shoe isn't short, it just compacts right in the forefoot. So that combined with a lot of the padding in the forefoot just makes it feel like a pretty snug fitting shoe. It's not uncomfortable by any means, and I had zero cramping in them, honestly. They felt actually pretty good because a little more of a glove-like fit on me, but they're not super roomy shoes either. I'd say a narrow and medium foot and go true to size. A 2E, I think, can go true to size on, unless you're really trying to, let your toes, breathe and expand. Then I'd say a 2E should probably go up 1/2 size on these. A 4E, I think, can go up 1/2 size. I think you're all right. If you're somebody with a really big bunion or Taylor's bunion or like wide hammer toes, right, especially on the 5th, that's where I feel like these might start to annoy people, right? Just if you have a lot of volume in the distal forefoot. Otherwise, honestly, I could see it being a feature or a bug, right? For me, it felt like a pretty glove-like fit. And because it was padded and pretty plush, it wasn't uncomfortable, but I could see somebody, like I said, that has a little bit more deformity or high volume in that distal forefoot, kind of maybe having another experience with them. Now, in terms of the snake-bitten foot, number one, I actually found these to be just as laterally stable as the Enforce Tour while they are new, just because I feel like you actually push through the footbed a little bit more in these, so you can kind of feel the ground maybe a little bit better. Maybe, like I said, that's just kind of how I felt. Because there's more dense foam in the heel overlying less dense foam, to me these need some sort of orthotic in them, but the problem with that is the lockdown of them only allows for a very low profile orthotic. So think more like Power Step Pulse versus Power Step Pinnacle Max, right? You want as little volume in the heel as possible. Because they don't have a shank, yeah, they're gonna be nice flexible shoes if that's what you want, but in terms of arch pain, arch strain, tendinitis, things like that, they do need something just to give them a little bit more torsional stability and torsional control, especially once the shoe gets old. So I'd say if you're not really suffering from anything, you're a lightweight player, low volume foot, I'd say, yeah, I mean, they're okay, but really anything else with the absence of a shank, you better have a low profile orthotic in there. Like I said, just because you're not going to be able to fit a higher volume one in there. And in terms of the performance of the Wave Enforce Court, honestly, I liked them. They, to me, played very, very buttery and very, very lightweight, right? Like it just felt very easy to get from step to step. They kind of glid, or whatever the word is. But I was able to glide on the court very, very well, especially for someone like me who's, more of an elephant on court. Can't fix short. And, they didn't have the lockdown of the Enforce Tour. They didn't have that spring that the Enforce Tour has, right? Like just that feeling of almost like a really springy pillow under your foot. They were much more stripped down, and that's what they are underfoot. To me, I still like the Enforce Tour quite a bit more. And to me, the Enforce Tour is one of the best shoes that have come out in the last 5 or 6 years. Really, I mean, it's one of the better ones until proven otherwise. So it's going to be really hard to compete with that in a budget model shoe, right? In kind of like the takedown version of it. I would say if you want a lighter shoe, don't mind the no shank. Like I said, they do feel very light and breezy and airy to get around the court. Don't expect a diving board effect. Don't expect a springboard effect from them. And in terms of the movements for pickleball, I think they do a little bit better in terms of pickleball versus tennis. I was talking to Aaron Cooper, legendary Nike designer, helped design Serena Williams' Nike Court Flare tennis shoe. That interview actually is available for free. It's part of my email list subscription that goes out. I do a monthly interview. We talked all things pickleball, tennis shoes, basketball shoes. It was really fascinating. But, he really described the movements of pickleball to be like a clock, right? It's just 360 degrees. You're going, much more, you're contained to that clock versus in tennis where, you're going much more, outside the bounds of that clock. And it was a really fascinating way to think about it. And in these ones, like I said, because they are a little bit more flexible, a little bit more easy to get around, I do think these do better for pickleball versus tennis. And I'm going to keep thinking of that too. It was such a fascinating way to think about it. So it's such a simple thing, but it really does make sense. So also, if you do want to see that interview, I will leave it linked in the description below to get on the email list to get that sent to your inbox. It was about an hour and 20 minutes of a performance shoe nerd's dream. So check that out down below. You will not be disappointed in what he had to say. It was absolutely fascinating. Like I said, if it were me, if I had to pick a shoe up off the shelf, it'd be the Wave Enforce Tour, but I definitely see the place for this in the market too. So let me hear your thoughts in the comments down below. Especially since if you've watched either one of the Dubs channel now here or the Foot Doctor Zach channel, my thoughts on the Enforce Tour, and a lot of you have purchased them. So I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. If you're going for this or if you're just grabbing more Wave Enforce Tours, let me know in the comments down below. And if you do want to see another brand new shoe on the market that just came out, super intriguing, super interesting, the Yonex Ad Excel going to the knife, make sure you click into this video up above and subscribe down below. Respect your ever info. I'll see you somewhere in the sneakerverse.